Well, for a close-up look at the U.S. economy and its role in the upcoming U.S. midterm elections, I'm joined by Joe Minarik. Joe is the Senior Vice President and Director of Research at the Center for Economic Development. Welcome back to the show.
Happy to be here.
So given some of the data that we're seeing, if you had to give the U.S. economy a grade at this point, what would it be?
Incomplete. It will always be incomplete, of course. We are, 10 years out of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The economy grew consistently over that time, not enormously fast. Economists say that when you have a financial shock like that, it does disrupt the way in which businesses operate. It is harder to get going again. It's harder for new businesses to get financing. There are other things going on as well. Technology, as you know, is changing very rapidly. The economist's buzzword is skill-biased technological change. It favors people who are very well trained in particular skills that happen to be needed at the moment. And unfortunately, folks who are not on that track do tend to fall behind. So we're not serving everyone well. The economy, in terms of its total output, remains strong. We are at a very good point in terms of the unemployment rate, but we're going to have to make some transitions from this period of recovery to try to maintain growth over the long haul, and those transitions are going to be very difficult.
So how are Americans feeling about this going into the election? What are their economic priorities?
People are concerned about the availability of jobs. They are concerned about the growth of wages. The job situation is a little unusual. We still have many Americans who left the workforce during the financial crisis who haven't come back. They are, in many instances, people from a set of characteristics, prime-aged male workers, former workers, whom you would expect would be jumping at new job opportunities, but that's the problem of skills. And then at the same time, the growth of income is very heavily concentrated, even more than some of the statistics suggest. The people who are doing deals and buying and selling companies do extremely well. Wage growth, even for people just a notch below that, is relatively weak. And for those who have no skills to take to the marketplace, it's a very difficult time.
And speaking of companies, we know that a lot of them are having to shift their patterns against the backdrop of this China-US trade war, which doesn't seem to have an end in sight. So how soon do you think, though, it will be before we see the full fallout of what's happening with these policies?
The difficulty with the trade dispute is that we are really down to the point where you have two parties at the table, and they are coming very close to fighting over a fixed amount of what's at issue. It's a zero-sum game. And when you get to that point, you never know what kind of decisions are going to be made. You've got two heads of government, and both of them have political issues. Neither of them wants to be seen to cave to the other side. Right. It is within the realm of possibility that they could be at loggerheads for some time. We just don't know how that's going to work its way out.
And we are seeing that from the National Association for Business Economics, they're saying that 2/3 of the business economists that they surveyed predict a recession in the U.S. by the end of 2020. Obviously, the trade war weighing heavily on their minds as well. Are there any signals that we should be watching for when it comes to the recession?
Well, we have a number of difficulties we've got to deal with. The Federal Reserve must normalize its interest rates. We had interest rates on the floor for the duration of the recovery from the financial crisis. The Federal Reserve cannot leave them there because it has to have the ability to both raise and lower interest rates. So that is going to be a difficult transition to manage. While it is doing that, we have a rising public debt, which is worrisome to financial markets. We have the trade dispute, which when you have that kind of uncertainty, it tends to freeze decisions in the business sector. And on top of that, we have the elections. The way that is playing its way out, nobody knows what is going to happen. But if we do get where the smart money seems to be, divided government again in Washington, the two sides are, at this point, have nothing to agree on that doesn't involve spending even more money. The only way they can seem to get together is to find expensive things they want to buy. Infrastructure is something that the president mentioned recently and Democrats have been talking about as well. So you have a serious budget problem. The Federal Reserve is nervous about that, has to raise interest rates anyway. The political environment is extremely fraught. And while that's going on, we have a trade dispute. It's not a pretty picture, but still we have this economy that is growing, that has a low unemployment rate. Part of it, I think, at this point is people thinking, you know, we're so close to the peak, it's going to have to fall. There's no place to go but down.
Certainly have to watch and see. Thank you, as always, good to have you on. Joe Minarik there, Senior Vice President and Director of Research at the Committee for Economic Development.